Shall we, boys? Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Do it.
Awesome. Well, for everybody listening, can't believe I'm saying these words, but this is the last podcast, Junto podcast, last Bestie podcast of 2022. Been a hell of a year. I'm here with Mateo, Jihad, and Aman. Rubino has got norovirus. Never heard of that until tonight. Texted 6 minutes before. I don't believe him. But yeah, we're hoping to just recap the year tonight, do a little annual review episode, which I feel like is just a really cool concept. And yeah, these three gentlemen in front of me have done a lot this year, achieved a lot, lots of transitions. So I think this is going to be super fun. And hopefully for you at home, it can be really reflective. But also hopefully you can glean something from the reflections of the three guys in front of me. So boys, does anyone want to begin? Does anyone have any reflections off the dome of 2022? Some of the prompts I shared were, what were you proud of this year? What are you taking into 2023? What are you absolutely leaving behind? Are there any moments, memories, stories that you harken back to as you think about the last 12 months?
Mateo's gotta have something for this one. This is
No,
platter.
I literally was thinking I didn't want to start. All right, I will say the one thing I am taking into 2023 is embracing the concept of controlled chaos, but knowing that you can direct the chaos. So I think every year, especially since the pandemic started, there was kind of always these feelings of like, oh, so much is happening. Like, how do I build the right systems and routine? And I think I went too far on one pendulum where like I had these very set, rigid, like, these are my systems. This is how I catch up with people. This is how I do it. And then this year, with all the stuff at AMA and then Jelly Smack and Beast and then moving and graduating, or not, I don't even remember when I graduated. I feel like I graduated, but Clara graduated. With everything happening, it was just like, there was so much chaos and it like rocked the boat for all these systems I've built. But I've kind of realized like I really embraced it the last 6 weeks. And I'm like, okay, like the real solution's in the middle where you just like can embrace the fact that there's always going to be a million things happening and just choose in a given day, week, month, whatever, like what directions within that you want to push it towards, and then just do that. And like, it's been working really well for me the last few weeks. So that's something I really want to take in to 2023. Thanks for making the first, Jay.
But also just for the record, because you gleaned over it. So Mateo, you this year sold a company to $1 billion unicorn, joined that $1 billion unicorn, then got hired by the biggest curator in the world and moved halfway across the country to a new city. I mean, that's a hell of a year, man.
It's chaos, man. It's chaos, but it's good.
But controlled chaos. Yeah. But like, dude, do you even believe that sentence? I mean, that's fucking nuts.
If you told me a year ago, if we were doing a Bestie podcast a year ago and you were like, yeah, Mateo, this is what's going to go down, I probably would have laughed and said no. But as Jihad knows, that kind of happened every year we did anything together. So it just makes me wonder what the hell we're going to be talking about in a year when I've started my next company that's terraforming Mars into a habitable planet for us. So stay tuned.
I'm curious, what did you mean by like redirecting the chaos? Like you said in the last 6 weeks, like you've sort of embraced the chaos, but like how have you thought about redirecting it, like maybe intentionally, and like what does that look like?
I feel like I would become overwhelmed a lot of times of like, oh, there's these 30 different things happening both professionally and personally, of just like, I need to just do my job, but I want to meet all these new people, and now I'm in Los Angeles more often, so how do I like add on to that social capital? And I'm traveling a lot, and I'm also trying personally to still get a job. So like there are all these things happening, and kind of what I realized going back to the very beginning of COVID, something that we all talked about and I think I really took to heart was just like, okay, well, like specific to friendships and relationships of like who gives you energy and like where does that live? And for me, what I've kind of done the last 6 weeks is just gone like, okay, I'm not going to get everything done. But like, what are if I'm going to prioritize this into 3 things, like what are the 3 pieces I really want to make progress on in like these first 100 days in my role, or in the case of Seattle and just like my last month this year while here. And so then I've like left a lot of things on the table that felt like a big deal at the time. And then you just realize like, oh, no one cares about your life except kind of you and a couple other people. So just do whatever the hell you want. So for me, redirecting just means like no more than like a couple big priorities, and then I just push aggressively in that direction. 6 months ago, I was trying to do like 15 different things at the same time, personally and professionally. And it's like such a trope, but like I kind of failed at not all of them, but a good chunk of them. You know what I mean? So it's super cliche and boring, but like it's cliche and boring because a lot of people have felt and gone through the scenario before.
Where do you think you'll be in a year?
The only thing I feel like is certain, and I'm really scared to say this, that it's certain because I'm worried I'm going to jinx the hell for myself, is that I should still be in Seattle taking this conversation. So I think that's actually one thing though, like this year, right? Of like, I knew I was moving here, but like I haven't moved like across to a different city in like a decade. So kind of knowing of like going into 2023 of like, okay, same people are kind of going to be around, even though I'm traveling, it's the same locations. That kind of gives me more like, okay, like, yeah, you kind of get like a full start to finish year. But honestly, Cornelius, I have no fucking idea. Let's be honest. I don't know if any of you three feel really confident of like, yep, this is what it's going to look like in a year. But if there's one thing you know about me, is that I literally never know. Usually you guys just predict it for me and then you're like pretty accurate. And so maybe you guys should tell me where I'll be here.
Aman, you also moved cities this year and started a business, albeit under different circumstances. And I feel like that's a huge role for you. I mean, in my mind, you've always been one of the most elite, talented minds I've ever met. You've worked at top consulting firms. You were industrious, it seemed, from afar at Go Health. And so to lose you from Chicago is obviously sad. I understand. I hope we'll get you back. But maybe just bring us into your world of just leaving a big corporate structure where typically you're interfacing with big executives and big CEOs to now be that guy, to be on the ground, to be in New York, to be in the hustle. I feel like that's got to be a pretty big transition.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a big transition. I probably still haven't spent that much time thinking about it, and you're just kind of in the day to day. I kind of feel that what Matteo said around just like controlled chaos. For me, like I have 15 priorities and all of them need to happen and all of them need to be successful. And I literally right before this, and I was one of the things I'm definitely carrying through to 2023 is lists. I feel like I've always done lists, but for some reason, I always feel like I've been doing them just recently. And they've just been so helpful. And I feel like I think one of the other things that I'm changing is I'm kind of like revisiting this like end of month review for myself. That's like part professional, but also certainly part personal. And it's something that I've done off and on, whether it's like end of month or end of quarter or something like that. Like in college, I feel like I did this like quarterly where like, okay, here are the things that I want to get done this quarter. Here are the experiments I want to do and all these kinds of things. But then I felt like in consulting and at Go Health, like I just felt like there wasn't the same pace of change or the same dynamism. And so when I do these like processes, I'd be like, it's kind of like depressing. Like there hasn't been that much change, and like I'll try and create different things for myself. But you just don't feel like I wasn't looking forward to doing the next one. So I was like, okay, like why am I still doing this? And so now just because over the last couple of months, it's been such a big change. It's been helpful. I do certainly miss parts of Chicago though. And I think a big part of it is like, even as much as there's so many people here in New York that I can meet up with and that I have been meeting up with. I don't know if it was like the familiarity or just like, I really like Chicago and like, there's I don't know. I don't think I subscribe to the like New York, vibe as much as we were talking about this when we met up impromptu, ran into each other heading to work. But yeah.
Yeah, man. And I guess a question for you, like, did you think at the beginning of 2022 that you were going to make these moves? Like, was this, I know you're a very scheduled person, so was this something that was on your 5-year plan?
I mean, definitely not. I think some kind of move. I think yeah. To start a company, probably not. I think I've been thinking about it a lot more, but I was very much under the impression that I was just going to kind of go do something earlier stage as opposed to kind of start something anew. I think the other thing was like at the beginning of the year, like in January, is when the CEO and founder had asked me to be the chief of staff at GoHealth, and that I thought was like the big thing. Wow, this is a complete game changer for my 2022 and what I'm going to be spending my time doing. And I think similarly, I think we've all felt that like every subsequent year, it's like, wow, like we're doing things that we just did not think that we would be doing this early on or even ever. And it just kind of gets you thirsty for like, okay, like, all right, it kind of becomes normal very quickly and you just have to figure out what's next.
Two takeaways from that. One, Aman said he's thirsty. I think that's funny. But two is that, sorry, Jay, I really think that it's so true in all of us. Whenever we think about the future and like extrapolate into like, where are you a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, however long, we always focus way too much on like what we're doing today. And it's just so funny. Like, Aman, I remember going on a walk with you in January when you like had this new role and you're like, yeah, so like, here's kind of the like 2-3 year roadmap, like of what that, you know, goes into. And like, maybe it's different, you know, I'll still take other interviews for fun because that's just the sicko that I am. Kudos to you. But like, you know what I mean? Like, we can't predict this at all. Jihad and I used to joke about that with AMA. Like, we literally couldn't pinpoint further than like 3 months. We'd be so off. So I'm always fascinated by these questions. More so, I honestly care less about like what we think is going to happen and seeing it come through, and more just being able to revisit this in like 1, 3, 5 years and be like, oh, well, yeah, that was interesting.
I was looking through one of my like there was this exercise. This is tangential, but like this exercise of like the 10-year plan, just like imagine yourself in 10 years, write down what one day looks like. Just like you wake up, where are you? What are you doing? Kind of what does your apartment look like? What does your house look like? Like all those details. And I've done that, but kind of another version of that was just like, okay, like in my career, what are all the things that like, if I could just do 50 things, right? Like what are all these like cool things that I might want to do? And I think I'd done it either senior year, maybe the year after I graduated. And then I was looking at it now and I was like, wow, I'm like already doing a significant amount of these things. And I'm like, okay, like time to make a new list and make a longer list. Yeah, it's a fun part to kind of be able to look back at.
Jay, I'm going to bring you in here. I know you didn't move cities this year necessarily, even though you've been doing a lot of traveling, but I know you've moved apartments because now you're right down the road from me, which I love. And, you know, I think knowing a little bit about the transition you've made this year and kind of end of last year into this year, I know that probably wasn't something that you were expecting, but at least from afar, I feel like you've really solidified your position in crypto and just in the alternative side of the internet. Like, I think that's really come quite true in your identity in a way that I feel like maybe if I was looking at you middle of 2021, I saw it emerging, but now I really see it at the forefront of what you're doing. Excuse the pun. So kind of give us, you know, a loop into your world. I mean, you know, you were the guy that was going to go and join a top tier consulting firm right after school. And now you've created this amazing path inside of kind of crypto and DAOs. So how do you sum this year? And obviously the year itself in your industry has been pretty, I would say, hectic. So you've kind of had to deal with the world's perception of the space and their probably lack of understanding, as well as your own transition.
Yeah, I think that's good framing. I think from an external perspective, this year has felt like 10. Just given that the last thing that you said. I think from an internal perspective, or just more closer to home, I would say this year was probably like the first year in my life where I wasn't intentionally chasing new opportunities Like I sort of hit this space where I was like, okay, I am comfortable with where I'm at. I am interested in the work that I'm doing. I am enjoying myself. Let me just see what happens. And I think there were definitely pros and cons to that decision. The pros being that like life in general, or at least my day-to-day, was just a lot more chill. Like I did get to spend a lot more time being with friends. I got to spend a lot more time traveling. I got to spend a lot more time just like enjoying post-grad life and living in Chicago and all of these cool things. On the other side of things though, like as I look back on my year, and like similar to what Aman's saying about like these like months in review or years in review, like I definitely was the type to do that as well through college and following. And like those years, those like months in review and years in review have been boring from a professional perspective, because it's very much like, okay, I'm doing a lot of what I did last month. You know what I'm saying? It's cool, it's interesting, but it's not significantly different than the previous month. There's not more to talk about in depth. And or like more to summarize. A lot of the relationships that I built earlier in the year and at the end of last year are sort of the relationships that I've continued to grow upon at this point. And I think that is going to be valuable in my career moving forward. But I can't say I've been like constantly meeting new people in the back half of this year, right? So, and I think that was very much an intentional decision. And I think I needed that just like mental recharge, for lack of a better word. But yeah, heading into 2023, I'm very much excited and ready to get back into the, I don't know, to light a little fire under my ass and have a little bit more of that ambition that I had in the last couple of years of college and in the first year out of school. And sort of chase down those opportunities and explore new opportunities that I wouldn't have found if I wasn't looking. So yeah, that's sort of the mentality I'm coming out of this year with. Feeling refreshed, but feeling ready to move faster.
Do you feel like your like learning capital velocity is different this month versus like the beginning of this year? Like when you say that, like, oh, the months were kind of the same. When you say the months were kind of the same, like, is that like oh yeah, and I'm still learning just as much as I was before, and it's just like also new, here we go? Or is it like, no, I'm kind of like getting into the routine and I like it, but like part of that ambition potentially comes from like, I know I can be learning or meeting or doing more? Like, I'm very curious about that.
I think it's a question of depth versus breadth. Like, I think the velocity, if I'm being honest with myself, didn't change significantly over the course of the last year. I think the breadth of topics that I've been learning about and like the sort of spaces that I found myself in have been, you know, sort of in the same vertical. And as a result, like I look back on the way that I was talking about some of these ideas at the end of last year and the beginning of this year versus now. And like, I feel like my knowledge of them and like my understanding of them is leaps and bounds ahead of what they were at the beginning of the year, right? I feel like I have a lot more conviction in the ideas that I'm able to put forward. I feel a lot more comfortable talking about them and pushing back when folks are, you know, arguing with me or whatever it might be, right? At the same time though, like it's the same topics, it's the same verticals from January to December for the most part. And again, I think that was valuable for me. Like I genuinely can't look back at any year in the last 5 years where that was the case. Like Mateo, when you and I were doing AMA, like sure, you can sort of categorize everything we were doing in a bucket, but there was so many different things that were happening within that bucket just from like, it's our first time starting a business. And I felt like in that regard, like the velocity was high, but it was more about like the breadth of the learning rather than the depth of any learning. I didn't walk away from AMA saying I am an expert on X. I walked away from AMA saying I have all of these experiences that I didn't previously have. And maybe I could talk a little bit more about the creator economy than others, than like the average person can, right? At this point, I can talk from a philosophical, economic, and technical perspective about a blockchain up and down. I could talk about like where I see opportunity headed. I could talk to an engineer about like what the roadblocks are in the next 3-year roadmap. But again, very vertical. So I think 2023 is not necessarily going to be a year where I'm like, okay, F what I'm doing now, let me move into something completely new, because I'm still deeply interested in that work and I still want to continue to have like both feet firmly on the ground there, because I think there's so much opportunity ahead. But I want to make sure I'm I'm doing outreach into other spaces and continuing to learn outside of that vertical, and see what opportunities that brings me.
How do you feel about the landscape, Jihan, in terms of, and sorry to keep categorizing it just around like crypto and DAOs, but obviously it's just had so much hype and potential. I mean, is there an element of you that's excited that, in light of recent news and FTX and things like that, that you think basically the playing field will kind of level out and you'll be able to easily identify the people that are here for the long run?
Oh, I mean, I think that's already the case. I think there are quite a few folks who were like, tourists in the industry who came around for a year and a half, sort of as things were going up, made their money, like took their social capital, whatever it might be. And this isn't even like in a malicious way. Like if you look at like SBF and FTX, this dude was just committing fraud, right? I'm talking about people who like maybe started a company, joined a startup, like, did their thing in crypto and then moved on to maybe they're doing generative AI now or whatever it might be, right? Like, so those tourists, I think are sort of washing their way out of the industry. And at the end of the day, I think that's for the better. Like I think there's that part. And then there's also just like, there's far less money in this space. So now people are forced to say like, okay, all this stuff that we've been talking about for the last 2 years is cool. How do we actually build sustainable businesses, right? And there are things like the answers to those questions have been there for the last 2 years, but nobody really wanted to talk about them or implement them because there were much more exciting things that you could do with swaths of capital coming into the space where it was like, okay, why would I go try to start a sustainable, profitable business when I can get A16Z to give me $10 million for my private beta AI startup? No. But
no shade.
But yeah, point being, it's definitely like over the last couple of months been like much more meaningful conversations with folks. If you look at some of the stuff that's happening in the space right now, it's much less like, hey, this NFT sold for $25 million, like this is crazy, and much more about like Visa is currently exploring, and I like talked to somebody on that team, like how they can bring their infrastructure to the blockchain, and they're already building on top of Starkware and Ethereum and other chains. They're thinking about like how they could better tap their infrastructure into like NFTs, but not just like from a collectible perspective, but also from like a supply chain perspective or something like this, right? So like things are getting a little bit more practical on that side. I talked to somebody from Shopify who basically was like, yeah, we have the feature ready to go where like NFT integration will be available to any Shopify store. So if you're a creator and that has distributed NFTs to your audience and you want to gate a particular product on Shopify, like, okay, we have that feature embedded and integrated all ready to go for you, right? Like that feels like a very simple yet practical use case that allows for profitable businesses to be built. That's wasn't there 2 years ago, was possible a year ago, but folks were ignoring it a year ago because there were other opportunities available. So yeah, that's sort of been the topics of conversation in the last few months, and I think that's honestly very exciting as a result.
It almost feels like the world was like so focused on just like getting as many people in the door. This is the next big thing. And it's like, yeah, it can be, but also when you just prioritize on getting anyone in the door, you get the people who only wanted to like speculate and make a profit. And then like businesses aren't thinking about the actual ways to like innovate and push the space forward.
There's this really interesting article I read on like the railroad boom in the late 1800s. And TLDR, it was like a ton of money went into railroads. All of these people were like, oh, railroads are going to absolutely change the world. And investors started speculating heavily on these companies who were building and like infrastructure required to build, and like very similar to what happened in the dot-com boom, what happened in crypto, et cetera. But the key parallel between the railroad boom and crypto that this author painted was there was so much money that flooded into the space that it actually set the space back, right? Like so much money flooded into like the railroads that they were unable to actually make all of that money back for investors in the time frame that they expected to make it, right? So what ended up happening is like interest dipped significantly because people were like, oh, this isn't actually going to go anywhere. and things didn't develop at the speed that it could have if it would have just been like a steady, sustainable growth curve, right? Similar trajectory is probably happening in crypto right now, where you had this insane exponential boom that completely dipped this year as a result of FTX crash, as a result of Celsius, as a result of regulation, as a result of like macro conditions, a million and one other things. And I'm still very bullish that like things are going to grow sustainably over time from this point forward, and that we needed a correction like this, but it probably did set the space back like 2 or 3 years. Whereas like had things just been like more sustainable from a growth perspective over the last few years, we probably would have been as far at the end of 23 as we will be at the end of 2026, right? So yeah, that's sort of the perspective.
That's a very interesting point, Jihad, in terms of, and this kind of, I think, connects to what you and Mom were saying around, you know, almost this existential anxiety, whether it's for a second or 10 seconds, that you haven't done anything new. And I think people talk about, you know, the curve of specialization and how there's like a really long like plateau, and a lot of people don't make it out because it just gets so bored. But like mastery in some level, like it just requires that. I've certainly felt that this year. But I guess my broader point, which I think is really interesting to what you just said, is like we don't think about growth through the lens of snakes and ladders, and we really should. Which is like, if you roll the die, like yes, you can get that ladder and you can go all the way up, but you can actually take yourself backwards. I think that's just a really valuable point you just made, which is, you know, these annual reviews have definitely become a thing on the internet. And it's interesting, you know, Jihad, we were talking about a particular creator this week and just how different his annual review sounded to last year. And I think it was because it wasn't such a record year, and it's almost like he had nothing to say because it wasn't vitriolic growth and smashing through revenue numbers. And like, I think that is net negative, really. And like, I learned nothing from his review. So I think that is great, and honestly connects, Matteo, to your first point around doing 15 things. You know, well, what is the downside of doing 15 things? Well, you might end up throwing 15 die, and one of them is going to send you down the ladder, or send you down the snake of the snakes and ladders, you know. And I don't think people think about growth in that way. And there's just so much time and things we can do now that, like, I find myself just desperately impatient, because you open your phone and you're always comparing yourself to somebody else. But yeah, I thought that was valuable. And I guess for the three of you, like, what was a low light of 2022? I feel like we started fairly positive, which is great, but are there any particular low lights? Doesn't necessarily have to be a moment or a thing that happened, but could have been a way of thinking, a conversation.
I mean, for me, it was just, I would say, as you guys know, I'm like the classic, I love taking a lot of things on. So this summer was month 3 for me, months 3 through 6 at Jelly Smack. I also was helping run the like startup summer accelerator for the garage, and was prepping to move out of Chicago and into Seattle. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be busy, but like, we'll get it done. And it was just so not collectively worth it, of just like, I did not have a chance to say goodbye to Chicago or really hello to Seattle, and like everything kind of felt like shit as a result. So again, it like all ties together of like, there's just levels of like, I just got too confident of like, I can just pull it all off, like here we go. So for me, I would say that's the low light, because when you're, you know, putting in these super long days, not seeing the people that you want to see, not necessarily like sleeping or eating well. Like I've talked about this with all of you. Like the first things that go for me in order when I'm doing too much is I eat worse, then I don't exercise, and then I sleep worse. And those are like the 3 things that, just in terms of mental health too, and like just relationships in general, like is just a recipe for disaster. So for me, that would be my like low light of the year. I would say it was just really doing too much and not leaning into saying no.
What would you have said no to?
I think honestly, my biggest problem was that I was trying too hard and not thinking creative enough within my role at Jelly Smack, and even with the garage, on like how I could delegate or just like only focus on what actually mattered. I was like, yeah, there's 15 things and fuck it, I'm going to do all 15 because I can do it better than anybody else. When it's like, that didn't actually end up happening. And I wish I focused on a few things, crush that, recognize some things didn't necessarily need to have me being the one physically doing it, and like adjust it. Like, and instead I gave, time to like see friends, or to like go on a walk with Amon at the lake for 2 hours for like some random fucking thing in Excel I'll never remember for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Like, that's just ultimately what it comes down to.
We got to go on more walks for the number of times it comes up. I mean,
yeah, those walks must be insane.
Dude, Amon and I, our walk game was great for like 9 months. It was phenomenal.
we did have some great walks. And that's the thing in Chicago. I also felt like you just have the space to think. Like you go and you go to the lake and you go walk around, even in the city, like some parts of it where it's just like, it's just nice. You have a little bit of reflection time. But yeah, I'll go as well as on the kind of the low lights. I think again, kind of comparing like Chicago, New York, I feel like it's funny because I think I felt like I knew more people in New York. Like my brother's here, my girlfriend's here, and a lot of friends from college are here. But I think partially because my daily routine went from like, you're in an office, I knew everybody in the office, got along really well with a lot of people, got to see most of you guys from time to time, and just a couple other like close friends, to now being in, we work 6+ days a week for most of the day, not really seeing anybody aside from my roommates, my girlfriend, my brother, and my co-founder. It was like a completely different kind of social environment for me. For me, I think I've been lucky that like my like sleep and eating and stuff like that like hasn't really been impacted too much. But then I just kind of feel this like, gray cloud over me a little bit, just because it's a different ballgame. And hopefully that changes as we hire people and I do a better job of like spending time with other people and other founders in New York and other, and travel and going to talk to customers and stuff like that. But yeah, that's been a little bit of a challenge for me.
Jay, how about you?
Yeah, this is a good one. Two things come to mind. I think the first is the living alone adjustment. The first year was a lot easier to make because I was still like, I still had a lot of residual routines of like, folks I was seeing on a consistent basis from college. And that like sort of just like flowed right into that. Whereas this year, it's gotten to the point where everybody has their own routine now. And I realized how much of what I was doing was dependent on what others were doing, or like the way that I was doing it with others. So getting to the point now where I would say there was a solid 3 or 4 months this year where I was just on complete autopilot and I felt like shit about it. And like, what I mean by that is like, I had very little routine. I was like waking up at like a different time every day, just dependent on like when my first meeting was in the morning or something. I was like ending work at a different time in the day, depending on like whenever I got everything I felt like I needed to get done, or whatever I felt like satisfied with like what I had accomplished that day. I wasn't actually consistently going to the gym. And then like, I'd maybe have plans, maybe like it just, it felt very messy, and it felt very, again, like just, I had no control over what was happening, or like no thought over like how my day was being structured, which is weird because I remember graduating and thinking, wow, I finally, for the first time in my life, have like complete control over my schedule. Like I can actually like top to bottom map out what my day is going to look like. And like work was flexible, especially for like the first like 6 months, where it was like, okay, yeah, like outside of a few mandatory meetings throughout the week, I can sort of shape this however I want. And this year has been much of the same, but I just didn't take advantage of it. And that, like, I would say I took like a serious toll on mental health. I think second thing tied to that though, was there were like a lot of relationships in my life that like I just was not actively maintaining as a result. And again, this goes back to like, they were there before, I sort of took for granted that they were going to be there, and then everybody starts doing their own thing, and I'm like, oh man, like I haven't talked to this person in a while, or like I'm not good at calling people. I'm not a great texter. Like these are things that I need to actively put thought into, or else like I'm not going to have these relationships. So yeah, I would say there's like a solid like 4 to 6 month period in like the middle of the year where that was like all going downhill for me. And I would say it wasn't until maybe like a couple of months ago where I finally like grabbed the reins and was like, okay, like there's really no excuse for this happening. Like it's 100% on me. And I just need to stop being honestly lazy and like be aware of that and make those fixes. So
what about you, Corn? You've been facilitating. Put us in your highlights.
Start with the positive though. You didn't answer it. Like there's so much that happened this year on your end.
I just like listening to you guys. It's great. It helps me. And I've also written an annual review and I'll publicize it. So I don't want to bore you with the same shit you're going to read. But well, it's funny, Jay, you said you maybe start with the highlight. I'm going to get to the highlight, but the low light, and I appreciate your vulnerability there, so I will reciprocate. But you know, I think the low moment, and Matteo will find this particularly difficult. It's funny. I think my low light happened later, and it was not at my lowest moment. And I'll try and like explain that in a weird way. Like maybe I didn't realize it was my lowest moment, but I think after the London retreat, I was just like, you know, and building up to that, like just for everybody at home who doesn't already know, but it's like, it was our 17th retreat. It was our first international retreat. I'm from London. You know, this is a big deal. It had been a big year, a lot of energy going into it. Great crew coming out there, 5-star hotel, like everything on paper. It should have been great. And it was great. It could have been better, but it just didn't give me the feeling that I wanted. And so that's usually fine. But when you're in your childhood home, the Monday after that happens and like everybody's at work, and I was just like in the garden, and Matteo knows what I'm talking about. I'm just like in this garden in Muswell Hill, very quiet, like deafening quiet. It's just like me. And I'm like, okay, like what now? So I think that was a low light, is like, fuck, I thought this was going to be it and it wasn't. And then realizing that like, because that didn't give me the feeling, the entire business plan that I had kind of set out for the year wasn't rendered obsolete, but was pretty close. So that was the low light. I then had some quite positive things happen and got back to America, had a really great strategic conversation, like had an idea for a pivot and went into kind of like a deep 69-day pivot from June 24th through, you know, September 1st. And I know these dates because I've been writing down them in the review. But I would say like the low point, if that was the low light, the low point was then in August when I actually lost a friend, and he was a year older than me. He was a pilot, and he died after I got back from Spain, and it was at a really difficult time because Monica had COVID, and I was coming off the back of that really hard summer, and she had some work stuff going on, and then that happened, and then that was just rough. And then his funeral was at the New England Air Museum, and I flew there, and that was rough. Like I didn't really process it until I arrived, and then when I arrived, I couldn't basically stop crying. So that was really, really empty, especially because him and I had a big relationship. Like anytime I was on a plane, I would text him. He wouldn't necessarily be on my bachelor party, right? Or like one of my groomsmen, but like we always had that thing. And I remember when we took off from New England, we got upgraded to first class, which I felt like was him. And I just couldn't, when we took off, I just couldn't stay straight face. So I think that felt really empty. And I had an unread Instagram from him actually when I left Spain. So I think those two things were really connected, of like, you know, work was really the focus and the priority. And then that happens to a guy a year older than me. You know, his spouse is one of Monica's best friends, right? Like she's a bridesmaid in our wedding. Like that was fucking real. So I think that was really low. And then I think the hype of launching in September was great. But then kind of like you and Jihad and Aman, like what you're talking about, then you've launched, right? Then it's not new. Then you realize you still have to get back to the basics of cold outreach and giving people your new idea and taking feedback. So I think that was a low period. I think the summer I got through it because of it's the summer, it's bright, it's family holidays. But I think those moments in my childhood garden and then what happened with Mike, like that was a big reflection in a way. And, you know, he had just taken a job at JetBlue and become a captain. Like he had manifested this. He had the Boston to London route. It was a big deal. We were so excited. And so I think that really hit me in a deep way. But I think the highlight has actually probably just been like the way the year's ending. Like a lot of things have really connected for me in the last 4 weeks. And that's why I think we play this game, right? Like this entrepreneurial game, like to Aman, what you're saying about that lack of velocity and change. Like that's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur is it can go from hero to zero or zero to hero like that. You know, usually just one yes or one conversation, right? Or one email. So the way the year has ended has been excellent. Like I feel like that pivot has really manifested in the right way. You know, I feel really good about my relationships, and my relationship with Monica is, I think, got really solid, you know, in kind of our wedding year. But yeah, Jihad, like the first line of my annual review is, and I got rid of the fuck because I'm trying to swear less and I'm sending it to family, but it was, you know, unadulterated, original script. Fuck me, what a year. I feel like I've lived a lifetime in the last 12 months. So I've had exactly the same year as you, and in obviously in different contexts, but I was feeling a weight, I would say, for about 3 months there, 3-4 months. And I've really had to dig very deep, probably deeper than I've ever had to dig. And so I think the highlight is just being out of that, right? Looking at 2023, got some really exciting stuff coming up, and you know, in a good place. So those are my answers. I hope I didn't speak too long.
No, I mean, I really appreciate you sharing that, Corn. I think like the one thing you and I were talking about on our call yesterday was like, we've known each other for how many, 5 years now? And
yeah, it's a long time.
It feels like you have been doing the same work, like at its core, like over the last 5 years. Like the ingredients are all of the same, but it really feels like things are coming together as far as like a business model is concerned on top of those ingredients, and that feels really, really good, right? Like it's a good spot to be in heading into the new year, where it's like, hey, this work that I've been doing, that I've sort of been manifesting over the last few years, it's there. It doesn't need to change. I can still continue doing that, and like we finally found that business model on top of it. So that's I'm very excited from that perspective.
Thank you, man. Yeah, and you guys have been invaluable in that, and you know, I think that's also a highlight, right? Is like I've designed my life so that usually I'm getting at least a call a day from a person that I really enjoy, and so I think community has really been that defensive mechanism against everything that life throws at you, right? And I think Aman is kind of teasing that out there, right? Like what he was saying is again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Aman, but you didn't actually realize how much of a community you had built and was inbuilt in your environment. And I think as soon as you lose that in any way, shape or form, that is really, really disconcerting and really actually hard to build back up. I mean, you know, like we're having this conversation tonight, right? And it's like electric and it's brilliant, but think about all the one-on-ones, all the brunches, all the fucking coffee hours, like all the emails, the texts. I mean, probably thousands of hours between us. So I think that is really disconcerting. And yeah, like people can leave your community without you even wanting them to leave, which is something I dealt with this year for the first time. And I've had family members die, right? Like granddads and things like that. But, you know, when it's a young guy who's a year older than you and you can see that shit right in front of your face and the impact it has, I do think it just makes you like stop for a second. And so, yeah, I think another thing is like, I'm not a 15 ideas guy, but like I am 15 types of ways on executing this one idea. And so, Jay, I agree with you. I think I'm arriving at a way of making a meal that like makes sense, is repeatable, is really delicious. And so I feel relieved by that. You know, I feel very relieved by that. It's like, oh, wow, maybe I have the dish at the restaurant that I know people will come back to. And, you know, that's the kind of gold dust, right? Like that's the shit we're all trying to figure out and manifest together.
I have a slightly tangential question, but when you were writing the annual review,
Yeah.
how did you approach it to really tease it out and really reflect deeply? Like what was helpful? What was it just like it just kind of flowed, or did you kind of have to work and chip away at it?
My favorite two things. And so first thing I do is I write the quarterly letter in the magazine. And funnily, I think I would have looked at them, but I haven't actually yet. But when I write that quarterly letter, much like I write this annual review, I look at two things. I look at my iCloud photos because I basically take photos of everything and I screenshot everything. So that gives me a visual representation of my life. And then I look at my calendar. And so sometimes when I don't want to write, I just write out what happened in those weeks. And I just use Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And then I back into the headings, right? So, and the great thing about being a CEO, and Aman, I think you'll appreciate this, is you can actually almost use the quarters as like product releases. So like Q1 was like the membership for me and the launch of the Saturday Club, and Q2 was Natural Wine and Barbecue Fest in London, and then Q3 was this summertime grind and this pivot and, you know, launching B2B, and then Q4 has been the launch of the investment arm and things of that nature. So that's been really helpful, and has allowed me to do something quite brilliant. And then the ending is just for me like 2023 ambitions and then 2022 reflections, which is really a combination of just like quotes, right, or questions that I still have. And so that's what really kind of helped me tease it out. And then I have a community of people who have actually been watching me through that review. So I actually shared it with one of the EE fellows from this year. And he was like, read like a travel journal. I loved it. He could fill in the gaps on a couple of pieces. So I really like that structure. And that's actually something that I would say if anybody's listening, thinking about writing an annual review and is maybe looking at the Packy McCormicks or the Perels or the Gabriellis of the world, I think an area where they all fall short is they don't actually show you any pictures. and sometimes pictures can just, you know, literally share 1,000 words, 10,000 words. So I'm lucky that I basically have pictures of my entire year. And so maybe, Aman, if you're up for it, you could just write no words and just put, you know, 12 pictures on there, one for every month. That could be a really compelling way to think about it.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And I think, yeah, I probably don't take as many pictures or screenshots as much, but Mateo, what were you thinking when you kind of follow a similar thing?
Well, no, I was just gonna say like I take a ton of pictures, but then I've gotten really into Polaroids in the last like year, and
Nice.
I absolutely love Polaroids. Like for whatever reason, just like I just carry this with me at all times. And if there's something interesting, I take a picture. And honestly, most of the time I forget to put it like on my phone, like take a picture of the Polaroid. Once a year, I just go in the little box and just like I can immediately remember, or like I have this little Sharpie, so I'll just write on it. It is amazing, like 10 out of 10. And I will be taking a Polaroid of the four of us at some point because it made me think of it. So
That's great. Yeah, that's really special. And I honestly, like, I would love, like, I know Justin does an email every year, but I would love to see your guys' version of that. Like, Jay, if you end up just doing the pictures one, like, I think that is so cool because, like, even though we know each other really well, right? Like, there's so much even I'm learning tonight about your guys' years. And when we end up having a focus, and if it is usually life and business focus, like, there's other shit that can get left to the side. But I think it is such a good, it is such a fucking great practice. And I'm for one really looking forward to watching this episode back next year and like being in that kind of like, I don't know if you guys have seen that Billie Eilish Vanity Fair thing. Yeah. Like that's like, that's really dope when she like, you listen to your answers from last year and then you're actually reacting them every time.
I think what we need to do though, instead of reacting to the same questions, is we need a Cornelius introduction and we just see how those introductions change.
Yeah.
Am I the Libertyville lover? I don't even remember what the were, but they were insane, and I need more of them.
I don't think you said that, but Freudian slip on your end.
Yeah, I love it.
The Cuban Prince, I think, was in there.
Cuban Prince was definitely in there.
That's my year in review. The Cornelius introduction poem.
Yeah. So I guess, but maybe now looking forwards, what do we think next year is going to bring for everybody? Like, does anybody have a strong sense of something they absolutely want to be true a year from now that isn't, or on the work, professional, social side is something that they're really getting after?
Candidly, no. Like, and you know, I'm about to go into hibernation for 10 days, and I'm sure I will probably have some more clear thinking afterwards. But like, my mindset is really just like, every single time I try to like overplan something, it just doesn't happen. So for now, I'm in a good place. I'm happy with the relationships I'm building, the work I'm doing. I'm just going to take it month, week, day, whatever at a time. And like cool things are going to happen. And like, I'm sure I'll have opinions at a more granular level, but like a year from now, I just want the pace at which I'm learning to remain constant. That's always been the biggest thing for me, like at this age, is just learning new things. And like Jay was saying earlier, sometimes you can focus that more on breadth versus depth. I think I'm entering a period that's going a little more on depth around like a few specific type of models, but as long as I'm learning a ton and around other people that are good humans, like I will consider next year probably a success. That's kind of a boring answer, but like, it's just candid.
I don't think that's boring at all. I think I like Mateo. So I was supposed to go to Ohio on Friday to like spend time with family, and now like this snowstorm or whatever is happening. So now I'm going tomorrow. So I should probably pack after this. But yeah, I'll be there, so I'll have a lot of time to reflect because there's not much else to do. But from what I have done so far, like the three things that I've sort of set for myself in 2023. The last couple of months have been my most consistent ever when it comes to just like taking care of my health, like eating much better, like working out on a consistent basis. Part of that is because I started spending shit ton on a lifetime membership, and I just like don't want it to go to waste. But regardless, like that's very much a priority for me. Is I want to end 2023. I don't want to like put a number on it or whatever, but I want to end 2023 in the best shape of my life. So that is, and I think that is a very manageable goal. So there's that.
You got to post before and after pictures now.
Oh yeah.
Now that you said that, we got to keep you accountable.
You're in review. We're gonna look at Jihad. He's gonna wear the same outfit.
Hey, look, you were the one who wants to do this this newsletter with only pictures, right?
Listen, I'm not afraid of my physique. I'll tell you that right now. You can see whatever you want to see. But so there's that one. Number two.
I think you misunderstood when I said I was thirsty. That's a different thing. Different thing.
Hey, careful. Jihad's gonna end up on Bachelor.
Oh man.
And, we're gonna have to be dealing with that.
That's 2023 goals for
2023 goals, The Bachelor, or something like that. Yeah, maybe that should be goal number 4 is get Jihad cuffed. But that one. Number 2 was just like, I think Cornelius, what you just said about like you just talk to somebody every day. That's like, you know, like a friend. I think that's like a big one for me. Just like, again, like these goals of like, oh, I want to make sure I'm like constantly keeping up with these people once a week or like whatever it might be. Like that has never worked for me, but just like talk to somebody once a day. It like on the phone specifically, I think is a really cool one. And then the third one is just like, and I've said this so many times in my life, and like it has never worked the way I expected it to, but it always works in hindsight, is just like write every day. And this does not mean like, you know, publish on a blog every day or do a weekly newsletter per se, or like whatever it might be. It just means like get words down on paper every single day, whether it's a journal, whether it is like publishing it, whether it's a cold email, whatever it might be, like something that is not work related. All of my best opportunities in life have come from that. And I think I really lost that this year. Like it was a lot of reading and talking and very messy thinking, and not like getting ideas down on paper and making sure I have that clarity of thought. And those are the big 3 things. And I think inevitably those will lead to like goals that I will be able to, or like outcomes that I'll be able to reflect on at the end of the year and say, wow, like this is crazy. I didn't expect it. But like, I think it'll come from those 3 things, like actually being top of mind for me.
Number two is interesting, Jihad, because one thing for me in the last few months that has changed a lot since starting with Beast is like at Jelly Smack, my calendar was like my life of like everything's laid out. And the last 2 months at Beast, like I like barely use a calendar. But it's made me realize the reason I say that is there's certain relationships I have with people where you can just call them, and if they're free, they'll answer. And if not, it doesn't have to happen. You can talk tomorrow, whatever. I absolutely cherish those relationships. Like that's just kind of who I am. I am that kind of person. And like just knowing what style you work in is like absolutely, if you can then set that up for yourself, like the way to do it. So it just made me think of that. But like, yeah, totally agree with you on the second point.
I had like this acquaintance, I think it was my junior year of college, and she had just graduated. And we were like friends in school, but like we weren't that tight. Like I didn't really expect us to stay like really close in touch after she graduated. But she had like this hour and a half commute to school from like her home to like her master's program or whatever every single day, there and back. And I guess on every single one of these drives, she would just go down her contacts list and call somebody. She would go in alphabetical order. So like once every month and a half or something, like I would just get a call from her and she'd be like, "Hey, I'm on my drive. Do you want to talk?" Whatever. And like, A, we became like much closer as a result of that. But B, she was like, that was like the best decision I've ever made in my life. Like that made the commute much less miserable, but also like I talked to people that I definitely would not have been keeping up with. And they were much more willing because they knew I had an hour and a half drive to like go like in depth on the conversation. So yeah, it's interesting what happens when you just like pick up the phone and call folks.
Mom, what are you taking into 2023, my friend?
Well, just real quick on that last point, one of the things that one of my friends does, which just like makes my day every year, that every birthday, is that he'll call people on their birthdays. And like typically, like how many calls do you get, like actual phone calls from non-family, like super close people on your birthday? And the first time I got it, I was walking by Annenberg on campus at Northwestern, and I was like, why is this guy calling me? Like what's going on? Like I thought it was like it had something to do with like one of our like clubs that we were working on. And he's like, "Hey man, like just want to wish you a happy birthday. Like hope all's well." We just like talked for a couple minutes. I was like, I feel amazing after this, like and he still does it. Like he'll leave me a voicemail if I don't pick up. And it's just like it's so wonderful. And I've done that a couple times, and I've done it with him, I think only once. But it really makes a big difference. So it's an easy way to kick off those calls if you choose to do it. Things to kind of keep or kind of bring into the new year, like I think for me, like honestly, next year is going to be it's going to be super fast. Like there's going to be so many things that I already kind of know in terms of when the product's going to be launched, when our engineers are starting, when the product's going to be launched, new customers, potentially additional kind of fundraising, all that kind of stuff. And I want to make sure that like one, I enjoy it and like appreciate the different kind of all the things that we're going to be doing, and kind of celebrate that with my co-founder, including like all the challenges that we've already started to see. Like, oh, wow, like we thought this was going to happen, and then this didn't happen, and then it actually did happen, and then it didn't happen again, and all those kinds of things, the ups and downs, and I mean, I honestly, like I feel like at the end of every single year, I'm always thinking about like how do I continue with my list? How do I continue with my reflections? Similarly, I think like that's just a big kind of reset and kind of like a balance, something that just brings a lot of balance. Trying to think like things to leave behind. Not a ton, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Like I feel like there's just like so much to do, and I just love how much like it just kind of like sucks you in, and like I love that. Like it's been a little bit, so
Brilliant. I guess maybe you just want to wrap. Who have you guys got your eye on for 2023? And or is there anybody in your world, somebody you're following, heard about, who you think has had a particularly powerful year and is worth shouting out?
I mean, my guy Mbappe, just what a game, you know, like
Not Bessie.
no, not Bessie. Not Messi. Messi gets plenty of attention. Okay. And so does Mbappe too. But the number of bandwagon fans that just came out of the woodworks to post on their Instagram story. Oh my God. I'm so glad I'm not crying. You're crying. You never watch soccer. You never care about it. Anyways, I wish I'm certainly happy Messi won, but it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Happy birthday, Mbappe, by the way.
Today?
It's today.
Okay, why don't you?
Oh man,
Wow,
that must be a sucky birthday.
Yeah,
That was
pretty
tough.
rough.
24 years old. Man,
Yeah.
He's 24.
he just turned 24.
Damn. Okay. Well, that sucks.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Yeah, holy shit. Holy shit.
Jay, who are you keeping your eye out on? I feel like you would have a list of like 12 people.
This is, yeah, I don't know this person, but there's this rapper called La Russell. Cornelius, I actually think if you listen to this guy, he might be your favorite artist moving forward. So the dude,
wow.
the dude is like a like indie artist out of Vallejo, California, like in North Bay Area. Has like, so like the content of his music is very just like, if a startup bro actually knew how to rap and like made like hustle rap, like it would be La Russell, but it's like not corny. Like it's actually really like fun and motivating.
Yeah.
And then second of all, like the way that he's building out like his audience and his like, he is letting people, like if you pre-order his album, like if you're one of the first few hundred people to pre-order like his album, you get like a cut of the royalties. So he calls it like a La Russell stock, like you're buying stock in him. Like he built this like stage in his backyard basically. And he like most of his concerts are actually in his backyard. So it's like he like you just like DM him and say like, yo, can I get a ticket? You pull up to his ticket, like his dad is barbecuing and like he does like a performance on stage, and then he'll like bring other local artists to come and like open for him or whatever. And it's just like this really intimate, like 250 person like event.
Yeah.
Like,
Jay, it does sound like though, I'm a little concerned with the way you described it. I'm just now picturing Gary Vaynerchuk as a rapper, like if he was coming. And I don't want that image because I'm sure this guy's great.
no.
Squeeze the orange.
I'll send you some songs. He has this song called Baggage Claim. And it's like, you know, like go get that bag. Like there's groceries outside, go get that bag. Is that DoorDash? Go get that bag. It's just so fun. Like listen to that in the morning and you're just like fucking pumped for the day. So yeah.
I think I'd prefer to listen to the snippet of you 5 seconds ago.
That's what you need. If that's what you need for an exit, Amon, I will send that to you every single day. Don't you worry.
I love it.
But
maybe that can be the phone call that we have.
Yeah.
Happy birthday. Here's your snippet.
But
Jihad in the gym, just rapping. Love it.
Yeah, he's on the come up. I'm excited for his new year.
Excellent. Matteo, how about you? And then I'll finish up.
Honestly, I feel like it's helping set a goal for me because I have no one come to mind, but I wish I had someone come to mind. I don't really know, honestly. I feel like there is always this interesting piece of the people that are like the silent killers versus the like very like public facing figures in any of the kind of verticals that we're talking about. So I feel like there are some like silent killers that I'm like, yes, these are the people. But like to everyone else, like who fucking cares? Because it's just within their network where like they're probably going to shine. So no one really comes to mind, honestly. Hopefully you have a cool answer to take us home because that's kind of lame.
Yeah, oh good. Yeah, mine is it's actually a creator, funnily enough. It's a group of creators called Good Golf. I've played golf pretty informally since 2019. Obviously I grew up playing soccer, and I had a golf lesson when I was 16, and I remember after the lesson I was really hitting the ball well, and the guy was like, I had a natural swing. So, and I'm not very good, I haven't broke 100 yet, but yeah, these guys are amazing. It was started by this guy Garrett, and these dudes just love to play golf. Like they've played basically at the top tier of the amateur game through college tournaments, etc. There are a few pros now that are like backed by the team who are like really cool. But yeah, they just actually split up. So two guys left, Grant and Micah, to kind of pursue their own things. But I can't stop watching these videos. I mean, they're just amazing. They'll go and play with John Daly Jr. They'll go play with Bryson DeChambeau. They just had Christian Pulisic on. And they just play a round of golf and they talk, and it's kind of brilliant. And they're all brilliant golfers, so they're really enjoyable to watch. But yeah, I just think they haven't yet penetrated the scene on a major level, but I really feel like they are. Obviously they've had this breakup, so of course they're getting a lot of eyes on them, but just amazing to see again a game like golf being taken over by, you know, a couple of young guys in their 20s. And these are really stand-up individuals. I mean, they don't swear, very polite. They clearly live for the game. They just feel like a different type of creator, you know, one that I haven't come across before. And I think it's because they're making videos of them actually doing the thing that they love, as opposed to just making videos to make videos, you know? And I think they're going to have a hell of a 2023. And I really like their golf swag. It's nice and tight, the way I like my European clothes.
Jihad's laughing for those who can't see our
It
visual.
took me a second to process what he just said.
Yeah, right?
It was a very delayed laugh.
What a way to end it. Just thinking about Cornelius' tight European clothes. All right.
Cornelius' physique.
That's my year in review.
Yeah. Well, boys, I really enjoyed this. What did you think?
This was fun. This was really fun.
It's always fun. It's always fast, man.
Yeah.
I hope you didn't.
Well, annual review.
At the end.
No, but I think annual review, I just think it's such a powerful concept, you know. Really enjoyable. Well, Mateo, are you getting a Polaroid, or are you are you eating?
I'm doing both.
Okay, great.
What's for dinner?
Well, actually, Claire and I are going out in an hour.